there are some IRS agents that are like armed. If I'm representing you in an audit, like we're good.
Did you have any clients go to jail?
Um,
I was making money, but I just didn't care about anything. First of all, how you been doing? You good?
Good. Yeah. This second quarter has been super slow, which is actually awesome because it's just nice to have a break after taxes and the craziness. So yeah.
Yeah. So I just took a week off for the first time in a very long time. The team literally forced me to take a week off. So I'm like, okay, maybe I was not the best person to be around. Q2 for us has been crazy, like very crazy.
I know.
And I'd rather be the other way where it's a little more chill. But how is that? Every year you kind of go through that, like you do all of your tax work, and then like, are you one of the people that just like travels immediately, like the day after taxes are done, like you just like bail?
I've tried it both ways. I love the idea of that, but in practice, like there's just so many loose ends that it's really nice to just have a week after, no meetings, and just like tying up all those loose ends, because you need this like separation period so you can kind of like get your mind off of it.
Yeah.
And then transition into vacation mode. So that's what I feel like works best, is like an end of April vacation, beginning of May.
Okay.
And then my birthday is May 2nd. So like a lot of times I'm like away for my birthday, which works really well.
Yeah,
so
that's cool. Did you have any clients go to jail this year, tax jail?
No audits yet, knock on wood, no jail. It's been smooth.
Have you had to do an audit yet? Or like deal with that?
I've only been exposed to a state audit. So no federal, and it's really super rare these days. And I like to think that I keep my clients away from like some of those red flag situations. Like they're not portraying red flags to the IRS based on kind of the advice that we give them. So
yeah, so you don't let anybody do any like crazy illegal stuff?
I don't.
Yeah, you should, just to try it out, you know. Because what I want to know, like I heard that like that Biden, he hired all those IRS agents with the guns, and they're going to come in and you know, take your stuff from you. Is that true?
No. Now there are some IRS agents that are like armed for sure, but like
why?
You'll never
Why?
No one will ever be exposed to them.
What? Who is exposed to them? Like who are they seeing?
Criminals. The worst of the worst.
Okay. Did they really? But that was okay. So what? Just remind, like you probably looked into this way more than I did. Was it that they were going to increase the IRS agent, like just staffing by a lot over the next X amount of years? Is that is that to increase audits over time, or is that just
they want to increase the audit rates because like the IRS is leaving a lot of money on the table, and it's unfortunate because it's, you know, you and I who pay our fair share of taxes kind of get penalized over time if the audit rates won't slightly increase. That's how I feel about it. Because I think that like when the government needs to raise revenue, they can either go get the revenue they should have gotten, or they can raise tax rates, right? So
right. So who are they going to go, like, who do you think that they would go to for the audits? Like if they're going to increase that, would it be the small business owners like us, or is it going to be the larger companies? Like where are they getting that money?
They're really trying to get more qualified auditors in that are qualified to go after the high net worth individuals. So it could be small business owners, but by and large, it'll be like very rich folks. Hopefully, that's what we're hoping, because right now, a majority of the audits that happen are to low income people, actually. Those people getting like the earned income tax credit, which you have to be basically below the poverty level to qualify for that. So a lot of those people get audited, which, you know, like that's peas and carrots compared to like these big dogs that potentially audit findings could result in millions of additional tax revenue. So
okay. All right. Well, yeah, I'm going to be pissed if they're going after it, because I just feel like that. I don't know. I think the government sucks at everything. That's my feeling, is like everything that they try to do, they don't do that very well. And so it's going to have these like other unintended consequences. So then they're just going to like, they'll be like, it's too hard to go after these like super rich people because they keep buying art and doing this crazy stuff and finding the loopholes. So let's just get the small business owners because they're dumb and like they mess
Right.
things up a lot, and like they don't really know what they're doing. You know what I mean? I feel like they're gonna
Right.
come after small business owners.
Yeah, I mean, that very much could be the result of all of this, because imagine like the qualifications it takes to audit one of these super complex, multimillionaires' tax returns. Like the auditor themselves has to really know their stuff, and there are very few of those people that work for the IRS, because if you're that smart and that good at your stuff, you're not going to work for, you know, a government paycheck.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I don't know. We might be screwed. I don't know. I don't know. With AI and with the way society's going, there might not be any point in paying tax. Like maybe we just should not pay taxes anymore, because I feel like we're spiraling towards some kind of weird oblivion thing anyway. You know what I mean? How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think that's a little doom and gloom, but I do think that AI is hopefully going to change the game and make this a lot less burdensome. So that's my hope with AI. I'm still an AI optimist right now, but like I could also very much see it going the other direction too, which is terrifying when you go down that
Yeah.
rabbit hole.
Yeah, it really is. To be honest, I've been using ChatGPT a lot more, and for like very basic tasks, it's pretty solid. Like
Yeah.
I ask it a lot of things that I feel like I couldn't ask Google, and especially like math problems and things like that, or like even in our business when I'm trying to like figure out like return on ad spend and just things like that are like very functional. Like it works really well, and it
Yeah.
explains everything really well. So I'm like, okay, I could see this being ultimately good if these people don't let it go off the rails and like let it become a living, breathing thing or whatever, like the
That's
sentient
right.
thing. I don't know. I'm like, why do these people keep doing that stuff? Like, just don't let it do that. Put some guardrails on it.
Yeah, the way I see it is like it's such a great starting point for everything, but like I feel as though it works best as that starting point, and then the human touch overlay to like make sure that whatever it's spitting out is accurate and makes sense and is communicated in a way that's more, digestible. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's how it ends up staying, but because the other option is scary sometimes.
Yeah, I didn't mean to take us like over the AI cliff. I wanted to actually ask you questions about like I wanted to learn about young Kristen and learn about like what brought you into the accounting world and like working for what was Deloitte? Is that who you work
Yeah.
for? Yeah, like
Yeah.
I want to go back. Let's go back before like we're at AI killing everything. I want to go back to young Kristen. Were you like good at numbers in school, like high school?
Yeah, I was always good at math, although, potentially I was better at like English and reading. And the interesting thing is, like, one of my college professors specifically said the best accountants are those that actually like are like very good at English and comprehension. So it's interesting that you think you've got to have this like math proficiency, and like often a math proficiency does, fit well with the accounting career track, but it's interesting that like you don't like that's not always who's the most successful. So
Were you like a rule follower in high school?
You know, not really. I've never
Really?
had the traditional accountant's personality. Like, I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit of a rebel. And I think I've always desired to be able to be more of a rule follower, because I think, like, going back to my childhood, I guess the one of the big reasons why I got into accounting is my parents were, they were serial entrepreneurs, really. Like they tried to start multiple small businesses and failed. And as a child, like it was really distressing because our family had different financial situations that like were very evident. Like it was very evident that my parents were not doing well or were struggling. And so I for sure was like, I'm never going to do the entrepreneurship thing. Like, screw that. I want something stable. Like, I want to make sure that I can always provide for myself and my family. So, accounting seemed perfect, right? Because, like, how can you not have a job if you have an accounting degree and if you're a CPA? But it's just so funny that I like came back to entrepreneurship because I think my parents did plant that seed. And I think it fits well with my personality because I'm not like the typical rule follower. Like I like change. I like a little bit of uncertainty.
See, that's interesting because when I talk to you about just like accounting stuff and I come up with my wild ideas of like, hey, what if I did this and I could expense this thing? You're like, no, you can't do any of that. You've got to follow the rules. So
I
I've
think I
always,
can take on different roles with different people. And what I tell a lot of my clients is because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who are so okay with change and pushing boundaries and breaking the rules. So I've got to be that balance to them. So a lot of times I'll tell them, like, hey, I'm going to come in fairly conservative here. You're probably going to come in pretty aggressive, and we'll likely meet somewhere in the middle. So I want
okay.
to be that kind of balance to you and voice of reason.
Yeah,
And
that
also,
makes
I
sense.
want to make sure that if I'm representing you in an audit, like we're good. We're foolproof. Like,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. So, okay, you were more into words in high school. Then you had this like accounting thing that you wanted to do. All throughout college, did you go to college and like, I want to become an accountant?
no, I started thinking I would do pre-med.
Oh,
So yeah, that's how I started. But I realized I'm like a crazy hypochondriac and I wasn't good in any of the science classes. And so I switched into business like right after the first semester. And I didn't know what specifically I wanted to do in business, but then I took my first accounting class and like I fell in love with it. I also am someone who really likes order and organization, and my brain just like works really well with kind of like the black and whiteness of accounting.
okay. Were you at that time interested in traveling the way that you are now? For people that don't know, like Kristen is like a digital nomad, right?
Yeah.
Like I mean, you seem to have like a home base and then you travel a ton and you like to go to like Europe and South America and all these different places. So like was that something that you in college you were interested in doing or was that later?
I just didn't know it was an option. Like I've always loved to travel. I've read back on really dorky journals that I kept when I was like 12 and like specifically wrote in those that like I love to travel and that was one of my hobbies. So I've always had that. I don't really know why I've always had that, but I have. And then I just didn't know that digital nomadism was an option. When I was in college, this was 2010. So like none of this was on the table for me until kind of the end of college when people started to work more in the online space. But even then, like my college was very traditional in that they were trying to like filter us all into these very traditional jobs, and that's how they define success in our program. So yeah, it was kind of a bummer that I wasn't exposed more to the different options because like back in the day, like most accountants opened up a brick and mortar. It wasn't actually typical to go work for another company. You just opened up your little like tax shop and that was it, right? So
Yeah. But so okay, but you weren't actually coming out to like become an entrepreneur from the get-go, where you were going to work for one of the big firms and like that
yeah.
was the path like so they were trying to filter you to all these big firms and you landed at Deloitte. What was the plan? Like if you were at that point where you're like I'm just going to like grind and like grow in this career and like get a C-suite. Like what was
Yeah.
your path
I
like?
was so excited. I thought I was set. I was like, I'm just going to become partner. Like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I've got it all figured out. And like within my first 6 months, I knew that that was not it anymore. And that was really kind of like I was disillusioned with it all at that point because I thought I had it all figured out and then I had nothing figured out, and I invested so much time and money into this career path already through getting my degree and going to into a master's program and getting my CPA. I mean, that was a lot. So when I realized that, I kind of just checked out of work, but I knew I wanted to push through, and because I was learning so much. And that's the thing. Like, I knew that if I could stick it out for 2, 3 years, I would be a better person for it.
What
Um,
was it like? I mean, so the big four, what's the big four? The big four accounting firms? It's Deloitte. What are the other ones?
Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, and Ernst and Young.
Okay. So why did you go with Deloitte instead of, did you interview at all of them? Or was that Deloitte was the only one?
Okay, so it's almost like being in a sorority kind of. Like you
Oh,
start interacting with all of the firms when you're like a sophomore in college and they're inviting you to events, and then kind of like one grabs on to you, if that makes sense. Like you almost
yeah.
connect with the people better at one, and they grab onto you and then they invite you to like interview for an internship. So I think Deloitte was the only one that I really interviewed even for the internship with, because I think at that point I just felt like they were my tribe, like they were my people. So I did the interview for the internship my junior year and then got the internship my senior year. And the internship is like a summer long thing where they wine and dine you and you don't work crazy hours and it just seems like it's going to be the best thing ever, right? So
Dang.
and
Okay.
then you get in for your first year and it's like, oh my gosh, this is a different world entirely.
Okay. So I'm curious about that. I want to hear more about like your early experience there, because all I've ever heard about the Big Four is that like they're basically like meat grinders. Like they just take these young college students that are like bright, starry eyed, and then they just like I don't know, like destroy them pretty much, and then like the strongest survive or whatever. The people that could just like take the work load, I guess, like those are the ones that kind of rise to the top eventually. So like, does it feel like that when you're in it? And is that true? Like, is that what it really is? And if it is, like, does it feel that way when you're in that situation? You walk in the doors and you're like, all of a sudden they're just like, I don't know, like work, you know?
Yeah. The okay, so there are a lot of great things about it. So I don't want to like just completely like smash it and if anyone listening to this is considering it, like I would recommend it for a few years. You learn a lot, you meet a lot of cool people. And it's great as, you know, a 23, 24-year old when you don't have a family and you don't really have other obligations. So that said, one of the things that bothered me the most was it's very hierarchical. So it was a situation where when you're the lowest man on the totem pole, like one of my primary duties along with all my work was like getting coffee for my whole team every day, getting lunch, ordering dinner. Like we ate basically every meal at the office for most of the year. And I couldn't leave the office until my senior, the one above me, dismissed me or until they had left. So that was weird. And I felt like it wasn't a meritocracy, it was just a hierarchy, really. And in terms of like opportunities for advancement, you know, it's a very rigid system. So if you're kind of like a mediocre performer, middle of the pack person, it's kind of great because you can kind of just stay in the middle of the pack, continue to climb, make partner and have a really cushy life. But if you're a high achiever, you don't get any recognition or reward for it because even the pay scale is so rigid that you can't really get paid more than your peers, even if you're like kicking butt and they're basically doing nothing.
So
So,
how
yeah,
do you move up then? Is it just time, like time in the system?
time. Yeah,
Dang.
literally just time.
Okay, that's tough. What is the like? What can you tell me what the starting salary was ish back then?
Yeah, so I started in the Boston, Massachusetts office. So high cost of living city, and I was making 55,000.
Dang. Okay, that's a little more than I was making as a teacher. That's wild. That's
It's
less than
not
I would have
great.
imagined.
And when I computed my hourly rate, it was at times less than minimum wage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how quickly can you move up though?
So you can move up I want to say like 3 years on average. So I got my first promotion, my big move up after 3 years, and they raised my salary from 55 to I believe it was 69,000. And I asked for 70 because they gave me good performance feedback and I was like, well, I'm going to like shoot my shot and ask for more money. And I think I asked for like 72 or something and they couldn't do it. They were like, no, sorry. And
Dang.
that's really when I almost like it totally even more sealed my fate there because I was like, it's just annoying.
Like, let's say you're in that career path and you're like, okay, I can deal with the time and I can deal with the hours and I'm going to stick this out and I want to be partner. Like, how much do they make? Do they make like really good money? Like, what's the ceiling?
No, I've got several friends on the partner track and they're expecting to make like up to 250,000 a year.
Okay.
So it's a great living and you're set for life. The pension benefits are awesome when you retire too. Like you'll continue to make that great money throughout your full retirement. Um, but it's not like you're not going to be, you know, extremely wealthy.
Right. What, okay. So what exactly do you do in those firms? Like, because I mean, it sounds like you were grabbing a lot of coffee and like doing a lot of like legwork, doing a bunch of like busy work and stuff. But like, what's the actual job?
Yeah. So often you're going to be in two main departments, either audit or tax. And I was in audit. And so in the audit department specifically, we're working with publicly traded companies. And we go into these companies for usually like 3 to 4 months at a time, and we do an audit of their financial statements. So they report, their year-end financials to us, and then we take each line of the financials and verify that what they said is actually true. So that's what we do in a nutshell. And basically, like, it's a lot of working, and also the accountants that work for the companies like inherently hate you because you're making their job so much harder. So that's actually how I knew, though, that I really liked client service, because I felt like they like actually loved me. Like, I was able, it was so fun to be able to kind of break them down and take them from like, I don't talk to me, to like basically being my best friend at the end of it. So I was like, okay, cool.
That's
I like
cool.
this. Yeah.
That's cool. Did you pick up a lot? One of the things that I wished that I had done now that I'm trying to grow a company is that I had worked in a bigger company to see like how the gears turn in these like giant corporations.
Yeah.
Like, was there anything like, did you learn anything from that? Especially working for yourself now.
Yes. I learned that none of them have it as figured out as it seems, and it's almost scary.
Okay.
Because these are like, $100 million a year businesses and up, really, that I was working with. And like internally, a lot of times they're just kind of a hot mess, still,
Interesting.
and still very much figuring it out. So yeah.
That's okay. That's a little wild. Can you say any of the companies that you worked with, like any of the accounts you worked on, or is that is that illegal?
I can give generals. I worked with like a big semiconductor manufacturer. And that was interesting because when we had to do inventory counts, I had to go into like a clean room and like literally wear like a hazmat suit from head to toe. Because if you get any like dust on these like semiconductors, it's like they're not usable. And then I worked for some biomedical startups, which were pretty cool. Those were my cool clients.
Okay.
And then I worked with a really big insurance company too.
Was there anything about like, I don't know how much access you had to, I guess, these companies' books, but like, was there anything that you ever learned about these companies that was really surprising? Like, oh, that's how they operate, or like that's what they do?
Good question.
It's
I
okay if
think
the
I
answer's
learned
no.
how clutch like being in a C-suite of those companies could be, and also being on the boards of those companies. And at that point, like, those positions appealed to me a lot more than the partner at Deloitte position, because a lot of those people had autonomy and flexibility, especially like if you sit on the board of a big Fortune 500 company, like likely you've done something really cool in your career. And then now your whole job is to just like go to a quarterly meeting and get paid great money for it. So I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't really know that before, all of the ins and outs of how that works,
Mm.
and kind of
Did
like
you?
also the politics behind it.
Yeah, the politics would be really interesting to me. What did you see like any crazy like expenditures, like crazy stuff, like where they were doing these cool parties or
No,
whatever?
usually if they're at that level, they've got it pretty well under control.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I didn't see anything too wild at all. And in fact, like, yeah, if they did have something wild, I'm sure they would have tried to cover that up from me.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so you were in the meat grinder for a little bit, and then you decided you didn't want to do it. Do you remember your last day?
I Yes, I do. It was kind of bittersweet, but it felt good. I honestly gave them like a 3 or 4 month notice, because
Oh wow.
that's how like over it I was. I had it really planned out, like when I was gonna leave, and like, because basically I didn't have a job lined up, but my intent was to do a gap year. So I had flights booked, and I knew that at this day I'm flying out to South America. So like I got to be done. So yeah, I gave my notice and still had to work for about 3 months, but it was totally fine and a lot better because I kind of checked out, and also I just had something to look forward to. And so then I left in December, and then in January I flew to South America to start my little gap year.
It's funny when I quit my teaching job, I quit or I put my resignation in pretty early, and so I had a good month and a half left. It wasn't like I was 2 weeks then out. That month and a half was like the best month and a half I've
Right?
probably ever had working, like even as an entrepreneur, because it was like I was making money, but I just didn't care about anything, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
Like nothing stressed me out.
And
It was like
there is
euphoria.
something to that. Like if you are so over your job and you know there is an end date in sight, like set that date. Like you will have a much better experience in the
Oh
next
yeah,
few
it was
months of your
great.
life if you set
I,
that date.
yeah, I watched all the other teachers that I worked with, like they were going to meetings and stuff, and like they were all stressed out. And I was like, this is freaking awesome. And I was
Yeah.
just like spinning around in my desk chair, like having fun all day. Um, for you, like, did you have, because I had that moment, like where I was like, oh, this is awesome. I can't wait to quit my job. Like I'm going to be working for myself. I didn't do a gap year. I just went straight into, the business stuff. But did you have like a moment of like, holy shit, I'm actually doing this. Like I'm quitting this like solid job and doing whatever. Like, what was your plan?
Yeah, I definitely had many moments like that because I think that that clearly wasn't something any of my peers were doing, nor like anyone in my family had ever done anything like that. So everyone questioned me, and it was embarrassing almost to talk about, which looking back, like I hate that I had to feel like, or that I felt like that. I didn't have to, but that I felt like that. Um, so yeah, did that answer your question?
So yeah, just like I remember waking up and having like a panic attack, like a real panic attack for the first time in my life. Like, oh my God, like there's like that realization of like the floor kind of drops out from under you. And it's like, oh wait, I don't have like a steady thing anymore. But I can't remember with your story if you went straight into just like entrepreneurship or if you went to work for a smaller firm first. Was
I
that
didn't know what I was going to do. My
okay.
intent was to not work. I had saved up $30,000. Well, between me and my now husband, then
Yeah.
boyfriend, that's what we were able to save up. And we calculated it. We were going to have to live on a shoestring, but like we could do it. And then our intent was to just come back to like the same jobs essentially. I probably wouldn't still work for a big four, but I would go work like in industry, maybe for one of my clients even in their accounting department.
So just like a mini
So,
retirement almost.
yeah, kind of. Yeah. I hoped that wouldn't be the case because at that point I started to learn and hear more about digital nomadism and that there were opportunities out there to work online. But I didn't hear about any of those opportunities in financial professions. So I thought I'd probably have to like learn a new skill set. Like I'd have to learn copywriting or online marketing. So, I thought that hopefully I could pull something off, but I didn't really have a ton of faith in myself. So yeah, my intent was to go back to a normal job, but 2 months in, I realized like, oh, like I love like to work and to hustle and like let me try to get something started. So at that point, my first thing that I heard about was teaching English online. So I started to teach for a company called VIP Kid, and you
Yeah.
teach like 30-minute English lessons to Chinese students. And I hated it. Like it was such a bad fit for me. I hated it. And it wasn't a hard job, but like I knew I wasn't good at it. And so I was like, this is not the thing. So I did that for about a month. And then during that time, I started to like dabble on Upwork. And Upwork was like a gold mine because I would look for opportunities for, financial professionals, accountants, CPAs, and there were tons of opportunities. I didn't even know you could really even do this stuff remotely. So I started to apply for things like that, and I got a job with a fintech startup. And they specifically specialized in helping people pay off consumer debt. So, personal finance realm.
Right.
And I loved that job. I learned so much because, like, they don't really teach you a lot of personal finance in, college, even as a business accounting major. So, I learned a lot, really loved that. But then I knew I wanted to like parlay back into like being a CPA. And so I started basically like seeing if there were any, companies out there or firms out there that did operate remotely. And there were a handful at that time. And I started to like stalk them on the internet. And I found one specifically called the Bottom Line CPA. And I just reached out to the owner, like cold email, and she was so nice and generous and was like flattered that I even tried to reach out. She responded. They didn't have a position, but she was interested in talking. And I responded back, didn't hear from her, kept following up, kept following up. I was very aggressive about it. And eventually got to talk to her, and she was like, hey, let's give it a shot. So I started working for them, and they served a lot of very small businesses. And even though I had all of the CPA training, like this was totally new to me. So I was completely almost starting over again, because these businesses operate a lot differently than the big companies. And I wasn't doing audits, I was helping with just the day to day financial operations of these companies. So, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I worked for the bottom line for about 2 years, but they were really looking for someone that wanted to, that they're fully remote, but they didn't want someone, they didn't really, I don't think they understood about kind of like the digital nomad lifestyle. So the fact that I was going to like take my work to other countries, I think frightened them a little bit, which
Mm,
naturally.
yeah.
So due to those reasons, I decided to basically kind of go off on my own and started my own firm. And that's what I'm still doing today. And it's
Yep.
great.
Grading and accounting, just to give it
Yes.
a little shout out.
Plug.
Um, yeah. So, but during those two, so you said it was like 2 years you were working with them. You had like your gap year thing. Like you were traveling? Were you? Did you stay in South America the entire time? Like, tell me about your travels while you
Oh,
were doing all
yeah.
this.
So I did a month in Colombia, a month in Mexico City. And during those months, kind of bounced around a little bit through those countries. And then after that, I had to come back to the States for a wedding. So this is like March. And then went to Eastern Europe. So started in Greece and lived in Athens, Greece for a full month. It was so fun. We found like an Airbnb for $600 and just posted up and did like day trips and night trips to some of the like Greek islands that were fairly close by. I
That's
loved
cool.
it there. And then we traveled a bit more around Eastern Europe. So we went to a lot of the like former Yugoslavian countries like Croatia and Slovenia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, just like these small countries that, like, when else are you going to go to those places? So it was a
Right.
lot of fun. And we were obviously traveling on a budget. So a lot of those countries were extremely cheap. So it stretched our dollars a lot further. And then I ended my gap year with my first like international solo trip to Ireland, which was a lot of fun and kind of got me hooked on solo travel. And
Okay.
then came back to the States. We didn't know at that point where we were going to live. We thought maybe we'd go back to Boston, but price wise, like it wasn't in our budget anymore. And I didn't intend to return back to, a full time traditional job. So we kind of geo arbitraged, but just in the US. So we decided to come back to Tennessee. I'm originally from Nashville, but we came back to Knoxville where we went to college and got an apartment for $900 a month. And it allowed us to kind of like continue to figure out what the heck we wanted to do to continue to be digital nomads.
That's cool. So during all those, because you went a freaking lot of places. Um, how was it trying to work? Like the logistics of trying to work. That's why I always get concerned about, because like, I hired all remote people, obviously. But when we've interviewed people that are like true digital nomads, I do have that hesitation in the back of my mind because I'm like, ah, God, what if they've got internet issues, or like, what if there's just like they're just traveling somewhere? I don't know. I feel like there's always some kind of like thing that's happening, especially for the people that like move quite a bit. Like, how did you manage all of that while having Upwork gigs and then a job and all of that?
Yeah, I think that it takes a certain level of organization and like determination to do it, right? Like you can't just go wing it. You really need to like think out your day. And like a lot of times we were actually, before we even booked an Airbnb, asking the Airbnb host for a screenshot from like an internet speed test to just
Ooh,
make sure that when we got there, there would be no issues. We could open our computer and like we'd have fast, reliable internet. So we did a lot of things like that. And now co-working is becoming a huge thing and almost like much more internationally. So normally most cities I go to have awesome co-working spaces. And usually there's information online where you can pre-book it before you even get there. So you've got to be intentional about it. But it's totally doable. So I don't want to like scare anyone away from thinking that they couldn't do it, because it's very doable. Now, when you're dealing with time zone things, that can be a little bit of an adjustment, but I think you just have to know yourself and how you best work. And like, for example, for me, I won't be able to work from Asia, I don't think, because it'd be a lot of working during the night, and I'm not a night person. But someone that's like naturally a night person, they'd probably love that schedule. So yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. Was did you ever feel like I don't know. I see people that do like the van living and like they do like the extreme. I'm going to say the more extreme versions of digital nomadism. Did you ever feel like it wasn't worth it? Like the payoff from like the travel and seeing cool things and the culture. Like, did you have moments where you're like, what the hell am I doing? Or were you always just like, this is awesome?
I think pretty early on as a digital nomad, like when we were doing that gap year, I knew that this wasn't going to be like I always wanted to be a digital nomad, but I wasn't always going to like not having a home base. And the main reason for that wasn't just like the feeling of change or being unsettled. Like I really didn't actually mind that, especially because we were doing like certain month-long stays, which you can basically fully settle in and adapt to, whatever schedule the other country is on, and it feels very easy. But all that to say is I really miss like the community aspect of having a home base. Like I really craved being able to, just like meet a friend out, or like, just certain things that you only get when you're plugged in long term to a community. So I feel like now I have the best of both worlds in that I'm, in a low cost of living area where I have a home base, but I can, because it's so low cost of living, I can afford to continue to travel when I want. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's one thing I would recommend to people that want to be digital nomads is like consider eventually you probably will want to get a home base again, but consider kind of that concept of geo arbitrage to make sure your home base is somewhere low cost of living so you can continue to kind of travel and live that lifestyle and take advantage of the freedom you have.
yeah. Did you ever get like lonely or depressed? Because I've talked to people that are like digital nomads that have experienced a lot of that, or just some of it throughout their time doing it. Did you ever feel that way, or like homesick maybe?
Luckily, no, because I think that I had enough I had enough community touch points, like even during the gap year baked in. Like I had planned to go back to the US several times and be with family or go to certain events, friends' weddings. So I think you've just got to be really intentional about that. You can't expect to like be on the road and then like just that be your forever thing and never want to rehome yourself or never really care about, being back in the US. So
Okay.
yeah, that's my experience.
So, out of all, this is a big question, but like, what did you learn about life from the amount of traveling you've done so far, or what have you learned about life?
Great question. I've learned to truly find joy in like the simple things, as contradictory as that sounds, right? Because like what's more exciting and, you know, what gives you more dopamine than like going somewhere new and everything being novelty. But
Right.
when you go to other places and people are living with much less and are still so genuinely happy, it really reaffirms that like, hey, it's just those simple pleasures. That's all that matters, is like a fun night out with a friend over like a bottle of wine, or just like going on a walk and like seeing some beautiful flowers, and just yeah, that's what life's all about. And I think that seeing people in other countries like truly have that same experience also just teaches you to not think that what you're doing is the only way to live. I think that's another really important life lesson, especially like politically. I think that a lot of times the United States can be really divided, but I think it's because that a lot of us, we villainize the other people because we don't fully understand that how they live is just like how we live, even
Right.
though it's in a different part of the country and they maybe have a different job, but they're still like doing the same things on a day-to-day basis, spending time with their family and like having laughs with their friends. And yeah, so
Was there anything about the US that you learned about or that was surprising to you, like after you, because like we all have, everybody that grows up here, you got your perspective. Obviously they teach you things in school about the United States and like best country ever, and then you go and you travel. Like, was there anything that just kind of like your perspective changed about this country, and either good or bad?
yeah, I'm way more patriotic than I ever was because I think this is totally the land of opportunities. We have so many opportunities here, and just glaringly obvious when you go abroad how much better we have it. But also, on the other hand, I think we are really super materialistic and just spoiled in a way. Like the amount of just sheer stuff that we have and that we think we need is kind of like absurd. And it almost takes me going abroad every at least, 3 to 6 months to like remember that. And because it's easy to just get sucked into that culture when you're here. And a lot of the keeping up with the Joneses is a real thing.
Yeah. Can you talk more about just like the opportunity? Because that answer kind of surprised me a little bit. Just because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like people like to hate on this country, but I feel the same way in all the travel that I've done. And I haven't done as much as you, but I've been to Europe and a lot of the Caribbean and, Asia. Like every time I come back here, I'm like, dude, there's so much more that you can achieve here. In a lot of ways, but like, what did you notice that it was like made it stand out that there's so much more opportunity here?
I think that like in other countries they can't be digital nomads. Like that's not a thing if you were born in Ethiopia or whatever, because like there are few businesses there to even work for. And then once you find a job, like the work culture is not such that you can just have all of this flexibility and freedom. So yeah, I just think that we have some really unique opportunities given the fact that, we have so many businesses here and, like we're global economic leaders really still. So
Yeah.
it's an absolute blessing to be born here. And like, it's just, I think we don't recognize it enough how lucky we are. We all won like the genetic lottery, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I'm sure that some people would listen to this conversation if they were from different places than we were, or whatever, look differently or whatever, they would be like, I don't agree. But one thing that I noticed as I've traveled a lot is like, there's no matter where or how you start here, the ceiling is still super high. And in a lot of other countries, even in European countries like France, like the ceiling is not high. Like, and it's like we have such a, the safety net here is way less than it is in other countries.
Right.
But the potential, if you do work really hard and you have like the ambition and you want to go build something, you can do that here in a way you can't do anywhere else. And it doesn't matter really where you came from. I think that the only difference would be maybe how hard it is, like if you're starting from truly like nothing or less than nothing, but you can still do it. And we see people do that all the time. Like you see all these
Yeah.
stories of that happening. But that's like when I went to France, I remember I was talking to it was like we rented a car from somewhere and it was a kid that worked at the rental car company. And he was talking about like how France, everybody's so stupid. Like he was like, the French are so stupid, like we keep electing these people or whatever. And he was talking about moving, and I was like, "Have you ever considered moving to America?" And he was like, "That's for rich people. Like, I don't want to live there." He's like, "I think I'm going to go to the UK." But it was just like it was just an interesting conversation with him because he was like, "This country, which France is like a great country," he was like, "This country, there's no opportunity here. I'd rather go to the United States, but there's like no safety net there, so I definitely don't want to do that. But I'd rather go to more of like a Western country,
Yeah.
that there's more opportunity." I thought that was really interesting. Have you
Yeah.
experienced any of that talking to people?
Yeah. My husband actually went to Cuba. And he said that none of the Cubans were interested in coming to America. They were all hoping to immigrate to Nordic countries like Norway and
Whoa.
Sweden. Yeah. I think the idea of immigrating to America is really intimidating because, yeah, we do lack that social safety net, which is really sad and hard because, well, it's so great here if you make it. If you don't make it, it's scary. I mean, you can be more poor here than almost anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
So it's a scary thing for sure. And I think that is something that our country, we there's a long way to go. So yeah, I don't want to act like it's all roses and unicorns here in America,
No, it's
because it's
not.
not. But
But
I'm very proud to be an American for sure.
yeah, one of the things I noticed though, as I traveled, was like, it's not rosy unicorns anywhere. Like, I think that we get stuck in this thing here where we're like, oh, these other countries are so much better than our countries. They do things so, they're so much smarter and whatever. Like, you hear about the Nordic countries and how much better they are. And it's like, what I noticed about every place that I've been to is like, they all have a bunch of stuff that they're not doing well. And the people generally are like not super happy with the governments there. It's all kind of the same.
It
I, I,
is.
I noticed everywhere.
It's the human condition, I feel like. It's all the same. And
Yeah.
like that's the thing. The Nordic countries do some of those things so great, but there's also definitely a a lower bar to like how much you can earn, and you're going to pay a lot more in taxes to fund a lot of those programs. And some people love that, and a lot of people there aren't happy with that. So yeah,
Yeah.
pick and choose your battles, I guess, because everywhere is going
Yeah.
to have its issues.
Yeah, for sure. Um, what was your favorite place that you've been to so far out of all the different places?
I have Oh, this is hard because I feel like I've gotten a recent acquisition of a new favorite place. So I spent January in Buenos Aires, and I absolutely loved it there. It is such a fabulous city. It's a huge city. It's almost as big as New York City. But it's just like the people are so amazing. Culture is so vibrant. Really loved it there. Also obsessed with Spain. That's somewhere I continue to go back to. It's so darn livable. It's just they make it so easy to just like live a great quality of life. So that's a place that's close to my heart. And then the third place I'll mention is Ireland. Like I said, I did my first solo trip there, and the people are the kindest, warmest people I've ever met. So it's really easy to connect with locals, and the pub scene's great. So you go to a pub, you meet new friends, and by the end of the night you're singing with them and hugs, and
That's cool.
it's cool. Yeah, I really have enjoyed my time there. So,
Okay, I think you've actually told me this, but for the listeners, what's the worst place you've been?
you know, so one of the places I haven't liked is and that I was really excited to go to was Croatia. I went
Okay.
to Dubrovnik, which and this was back in 2018. So they had just shot Game of Thrones there. So I was super excited to go because I really loved that show. But it just felt like Disneyland because it was a city truly just taken over and overrun by tourists. A beautiful city, but we didn't get any of the kind of like local flair while we were there. And then another interesting place is Montevideo, Uruguay. We went there right before we went to Buenos Aires, and it's only 3 hours away by ferry from Buenos Aires. So we thought we would love it, but it wasn't it. There was something about it that wasn't as lively and vibrant as we were expecting.
Wasn't there a German city that you went to that you didn't like?
Berlin, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Surprisingly, I didn't love Berlin. I feel like people are going to come for me if I say that. But I think because it was my first taste of Germany, and I was obviously expecting like probably more of a Munich, where you're really getting that kind of like Bavarian culture. And Berlin's just very multicultural, a very big city, sprawling. And I was there solo, and I felt like I wasn't really able to like connect with any locals. And yeah, it just wasn't the best for me. But also, like, you'd talk to someone else that went at the same time and did the same things, and they'd probably love it. So
Okay.
different strokes for different folks.
Yeah. What's your favorite story of connecting with the local or locals in one of these places?
Okay, this one's so random, but we were in the country of Albania, and the people there are fantastic. They've kind of just had like a string of just really like bad luck and have been dealt a bad hand. Communist country and like just really poor. But when we were there, we went to this like small village, and we were strolling around the streets, and a local just like took us under his wing and basically like toured us around the whole village and gave us the rundown and then invited us into his home. And he had absolutely nothing, but was trying to give us all this food and tea and drinks, and just like the sweetest human, and so, so generous to us. And yeah, it just really says a lot, especially because, like, those people, that the food they may be giving you may just be like all they have to eat for the week.
That's cool.
So it's very touching when you have those types of moments, and that's something that really keeps my love for travel alive, and
Yeah.
truly like my faith in humanity alive in a way too.
Yeah. My favorite one, my wife and I went to Aruba. And Aruba's like, have you ever been to Aruba?
No, I haven't.
It's an interesting one. It's a pretty small island. It's a Dutch island, and there's you can do like cruises to Aruba. So like the northern part of the island, I think it's the northern part of the island, is like this cruise terminal. Like it is just like the most touristy. It's kind of awful. I think like it's just really like all the hotels are there, all the restaurants are like Italian place. It's like not. It's just
Yeah.
not a good travel place. But if you go to the other end of the island, it's all where the people actually live. And so we booked an Airbnb there, and I booked an Airbnb for $45 a night, and it ended up having bed bugs. It was a really bad experience for my wife. My wife was pissed at me, but I was like, I wasn't making very much money back then. This is like right when I had quit my job to like do all the stuff. So I was like trying to go on a budget. Anyway, long story short, we stayed at this place, and we ended up meeting some locals. We went to a bar, and they like invited us to like, we're doing like a crock pot or a potluck thing. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's cool. So we went to this bar like right down the street. It was like old, like tiny, tiny dive bar. And around the back, they had like some tables set up, and like they just, all the people from the neighborhood just like brought food. Like, and it was so cool. And like they let us try all the stuff. A lot of it was iguana, which when you go to Aruba, there are iguanas running all over the place out there, and it's illegal to eat them, but all the people do it anyway. And it was pretty damn good. Honestly, it was like in a stew that they gave it to us in.
Whoa, what a cool experience though.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, it was so great. And it was like just talking to them, like everybody in Aruba, not everybody, but a lot of them have flagpoles in their front yard. And so whenever there's elections, like they'll fly the flag of the different party. And I think there was like one that was like green, one was red, but it was like the same thing as we do here. Like they were just arguing about like, it's basically like the conservatives and liberals, I think. But it was just that. It was just like them drinking beer, like arguing about politics and eating iguana, which is really cool. And we got to like experience that. And it's just like a very fun. It was one of the cool things about travel, that like you just get those stories things you would experience that like you never could
Yeah.
experience elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people go to Aruba and never see that side of it or get to
No.
experience that. So props to you guys for seeking those types of things out. That's super
Yeah.
cool.
We got the bed bugs too, though, so that was not good.
Battle wounds were acquired.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, we're running up on time. I'm going to have you on again at some point so we can actually talk about like accounting and gradient and all the cool things. So this will be like a two-parter that we'll do. But thank you for joining me. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Bobby. It's been a blast.
Yep.
Appreciate you.
All right. Well, see you. We'll do part two
Yeah,
soon. I'll let you know. We'll
can't
schedule it.
wait.